Hello, Assalamu alaikum, Sat Sri Akal, Namaste. My name is Farheen Khan and you're watching The Azeeza Show. We have, in our last segment, we were talking about mental illness and the prevalence of it in our communities. We've also spoken about women and their experiences, whether it be with abuse or any other type of challenge that they may face. And a lot of times what happens is that we meet these women who, and individuals who've been through some really difficult challenges, but are still able to be resilient, and really inspire many of us. So today I'm really excited to have our guest, Asma Hussain. Asma, thank you so much for being here. It's definitely an honor to have you and to speak to you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me as well. Yeah. So Asma, I kind of want to just jump right into this. So tell us, for those who don't know you and your story, tell us about your story.
So my story begins when I was born, but more recently. In August of 2013, my husband Amr was killed at a peaceful march in Alexandria in Egypt. And a lot of people know me from sort of the aftermath of what happened because I wrote a lot on social media and I expressed myself. But so leading up to that, him and I and our infant daughter went to Egypt to visit his family because they had never seen my daughter Ruqayya. So we went over the summer to visit them. And actually when we went, we didn't realize how chaotic it would become. We didn't realize, because we were kind of out of the picture in Egypt. We were living in Canada. We didn't really have all the news. So when we went, I think a couple of weeks after we went, the military coup happened. So they deposed the democratically elected president, and there was just a lot of chaos afterwards. There were sit-ins and protests and marches. And then on August 14th, the Rabaa massacre happened. And for those who don't know what the Rabaa massacre is, Human Rights Watch actually wrote a very long research paper on it. And I think the research paper is called All According to Plan. It's a very, very good paper. It's very detailed. I think they called it one of the worst massacres of protesters in recent human history. There were 1,000 people killed on one day in that square. And at the time we were in Alexandria, so a couple hours away. But when my husband received the news, just from social media and stuff, he was really, really, really upset. And I think we all were. And just the images coming out were really, really heartbreaking. So on that Friday, what he did was he went to Friday prayers, and all the congregants from Friday prayer walked out and joined a very peaceful march just throughout the city of Alexandria. And I think, I was worried about him, and I called him and I said, when are you coming home? He said, I'm on my way home now. And then about 20 minutes later, I got a call from his cell phone from somebody, and Arabic isn't really my first language, so I handed the phone over to my mother-in-law. We were staying with them, and just her reaction from what the person was saying made me know that my husband was shot and killed in that moment. And it was something that was, it came obviously as a complete shock, because just 20 minutes earlier I was talking to him, and he was like, yeah, it's very peaceful. There's thousands of people here, men, women, children. It's also almost like a family affair. And I know other people who are in the same march as him. So the military, the Egyptian military, just started firing at the crowd. And I think around 45 people or so were killed at that moment.
So sorry.
Thank you.
Wow. So you heard about this, and then you mentioned that you started to write about it. So what happened after that point? So you found out that he was killed, and then how soon were you able to come back? Like, what was that? I can't even imagine what that felt like or what that experience was like.
So our tickets were actually booked on the 19th to come back to Canada.
Okay.
And he was killed on the 16th. His funeral was right away on the 17th. So I had to push my ticket back a little bit because there was just a lot of paperwork to take care of and you know, things to take care of, especially like I hadn't planned to travel with just me and my daughter. She was around, I think, 9 months at that time. So it was a little bit difficult, but I was able to travel back within like a week and a half from the event. So my brother came and got me. He came from the US and took me back home. So yeah, I think literally the day after he was killed, after his funeral prayer, I just had this like, there's something in me that needed to be expressed. And I think one of the reasons is that so many people hundreds of people were contacting me, my friends and people who had read the news and asking me if I was okay. And I kind of wanted to write something just to let people know I was okay, because I couldn't respond to everybody individually. So I wrote a Facebook note, and that Facebook note, you know, when I closed my laptop, I didn't realize that that Facebook note was going viral amongst people I didn't even know. So writing for me, even in that moment, was therapeutic in a way, because I was dealing with so much, and just the shock of it, I think, was like, for the first couple of days, it was just shock. Like you don't even know how to feel, right? Because it's something so unexpected. So that writing, and the writing that I did for years, and I still do, was a way for me to express myself, to navigate those feelings, right? Because I felt that if I just kept them within me, then it would become toxic, right? And writing has always been my way of expression, my method of expression. So it didn't change. So yeah, and I found that shockingly, so many people were connecting to what I was writing, because I would write about my pain and my struggle, and a lot of people, I felt like it gave voice to a lot of people who were struggling with things, not necessarily, you know, widowhood or having a member of their family pass away, but just other struggles, you know, who weren't able to voice their pain. You know what I mean? And I guess you've written a book now as well. Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about what that is about? Or?
Yes. So my book is called A Temporary Gift, Reflections on Love, Loss, and Healing. And the book is essentially, when I started writing the book, I didn't actually mean to write the book. It was just, I was just expressing myself, and I would post on social media, because I knew from the first time I posted the day after my husband passed away, I saw the reaction to it, and I saw just how people connected with that pain and that struggle. So I kept writing and I kept posting, and eventually, maybe a year into it, you know, I would constantly be messaged by people saying, please compile your writing and put it into a book so that we can have it, so it's a resource for us. And I kind of shrugged it off at the beginning. I'm like, you know, writing a book is too hard. Like I never considered what it would feel like or what kind of work would go into writing a book. But then just from the amount of people who were encouraging me to write it, I thought, you know what, if this is a need, then let me do it. You know, because I like, in my journey, I noticed that a lot of times when I went looking for resources to help me, it was really a struggle to find them. Really a struggle. I mean, there would be an article here and there, but nothing sort of definitive that would that talked about how, not just how to overcome grief and pain, but also how to overcome it while using your faith, right? Because for me, a lot of my strength comes from my faith. So that was definitely the angle that I wrote the book, the angle from which I wrote the book. So yeah, it's been going well. It's been out for about 2 years now. It's been going really well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? When writing, for sure. I mean, it's definitely in my own life as well. The journaling was kind of something that I would do after 9/11, after I experienced my attack and things, and then just being able to like write it out was very therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
And then again, same thing, right? Not really thinking it would be a book of any kind, but then really thinking about the fact that as people start to connect more, then perhaps there's somebody else who can find value in that.
For sure.
So, for that, I'm very grateful that you've written your book, because you're right, there are a lot of people out there who actually can connect in their own way, be it large or small, but it's always good to have writers who can share that.
Yeah.
So, so you've talked a little about what what inspires you to kind of, keep going. So what is that? Like, you mentioned the word faith. So can you tell us, like, how is it that you're able to kind of manage despite having such a big loss?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that motivates me now, years later, to keep writing and to keep sort of expressing my my emotions and the way that I've sort of dealt with the different challenges that have come up in the past couple of years. So one of the things is just people's comments about my book, because almost on a daily basis, people message me and email me about how they connected with my work and how it's something that was transformative for them, not necessarily because of my specific content, but because the book was, like, they were able to see how their faith could connect to them on an emotional level.
Right.
And I think that for a lot of people, faith is not something that they were taught on an emotional level. It was kind of just like a very rigid, you must believe this, you must believe that, so for them to see faith enacted and sort of as a tool for their healing is something new. And I think that the book the book is great, but I'm biased, of course, but I think what it leads to is actually better, so that people, when they look into their faith, they are able to connect, right, more deeply. And I think that's important. So, the encouraging comments from people, it really does help me keep going with the writing, because I know that it's something that's needed. And I think from day one, my daughter has definitely been a motivation for me, because even literally the day that I heard the news of my husband's passing, she was still there. She still needed me. She still needed to be fed and changed and played with, and you know what I mean? 9 months old, they're in that phase where they're like, the interaction between you and the child is really important.
Yes.
So I had to, and I was very conscious about staying engaged with her, instead of sort of going into like a little, going into myself and staying and sort of living in my grief without acknowledging her. So she definitely is one of the motivations for me to keep going.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite something. So what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be back. Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching the Azeeza Show, and with us today we have our guest Asma Hussein, who's talking about her experience and her writing. So Asma, before we took our break, we were talking a little bit about what inspires you to kind of keep going. So I know, I can only imagine, I know from my own experiences of dealing with difficult times, how hard it can be sort of to move, sometimes, like, whether it be physically or emotionally, or just being able to engage day to day. And in those moments, like, how did you manage? What are some of the things that you've used to cope with some of these challenges?
So one of the things that happened after my husband passed away is that I started really connecting with my faith. And that was one of the most meaningful things that has helped me along the way, even up until now. But I would pray a lot, like ask God, because for me, my relationship with God has been really beautiful, really open. And when I sit and I open my hands and I supplicate or I pray, that was a way for me to release so much of what was in me. in almost like a conversation, you know, because that's what I needed. You know, I didn't just need like a very rigid prayer and then to move on with my life. I needed an outlet, and that was an outlet for me, and I use that a lot. And there's a tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that talks about how the prayer of the oppressed person, there's no veil between it and God, so it's something that reaches God, you know, and whether and that tradition is whether you're a Muslim or not a Muslim, right? That if you're an oppressed person, your prayer reaches God. You know, and it doesn't say only if you're a Muslim or anything like that. It's just, you know, it's a direct line. And I think for me, I use that, you know, because I knew that my prayers at that moment, there wasn't going to be any barrier between me and God. And there's also another tradition, another saying of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he says that, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, I don't memorize it, but all the affairs of a believer are good. And if something good happens to him, he's grateful for it, and that's good for him. That gratitude is good for him. And if something bad happens to him, he's patient, and that patience is good for him. So that, you know, thinking about it from that lens, and I had to continuously remind myself of this because, you know, pain takes you to dark places, you know.
Absolutely.
So this process of just continuously reminding yourself that nothing is my fault, but I can use what's happening to me to become a better person.
Right.
You know, and I think this idea where you accept your emotions for what they are without filtering them, because I think that a lot of us growing up, we were taught that certain emotions are good and certain emotions are bad, and certain things to express are acceptable and other things to express are not acceptable. Regardless of our culture, you know, in so many cultures and so many faiths and so many walks of life, this is the case, right? But that's not how we were created. You know, we were created as human beings with complex emotions, and when we try to deny those emotions, that's when things get pent up and it negatively affects our mental health. So I was at a point where I'm like, I can't deny my feelings because they're so big and they're so intense that trying to deny them would suffocate me.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So in that moment, I learned that acknowledging my feelings and being open about them was actually something that really helped me. And expressing them, you know, and of course expressing them in a way, in a positive way, you know, not in a destructive way, of course.
And what kind of like advice would you give to somebody who is going through a difficult time in their life, be it a loss of a family member or any other sort of trauma that they've experienced or are currently experiencing?
It's a great question. I think what I just said about acknowledging your emotions is like number one, because the moment you get into a place where you're denying, oh, I'm not supposed to feel this way, so I'm not going to feel this way, that's almost like a poison. It poisons you from inside out. You know what I mean? And it might not show now, but in 10 years, in 20 years, that comes back. It always comes back when you don't acknowledge. And then the other thing is learning how to channel that, right? Because there's a way where you accept your emotions to a point where you let it control your life, you let it control your actions, and you let it take the reins of your life. You know, whether it makes you an angry person or it brings out your rage or whatever. So that's I don't see that as a positive thing, but I think that there's a way to channel your emotions so that you can heal, and you can also become a better person through it. You know, I truly believe that God gives us these challenges not in a vacuum, right? It's for a purpose, and the purpose is to strengthen us for our future challenges, to help us shoulder the bigger things that are coming. You know what I mean?
And to be a light for others.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we have that opportunity to.
Absolutely. And when you're given that opportunity, that's such a blessing.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. That's great. So, I guess, how's your daughter now? How old is your daughter now?
She is 5.
She's 5?
Yeah, she's quite rambunctious.
Right.
Yeah, she's 5. I think we'll leave it at that. I think that speaks for itself.
Right. And how have you know, and what else do you kind of do? What else do you engage in? What are the things that keep you going?
So my daughter's name is Ruqayya, if I hadn't mentioned that. I have a small business called Ruqayya's Bookshelf.
Okay.
And I actually publish, so I published A Temporary Gift through Ruqayya's Bookshelf, and now I'm focused on publishing some really great picture books for Muslim kids, and she is obviously the inspiration for it because it's called Ruqayya's Bookshelf. Yes. And these are all books that I want to see on my daughter's bookshelf. You know, books with, and I focus on diverse Muslim protagonists, just because when you go to your average library, you know, it's hard. It's hard to find those kinds of books for your kids. And I think that telling stories through books that children have their hands on is such an impactful way to get a message across. Because me as a child, I remember the books that I read, and I remember what lessons they left me with. Right. You know what I mean? So that's something that I've been working on for a couple of years, and it's fun. It's really fun work, you know? So I like to do both. I like to do this kind of really fun work, and I like to also do work that's a little bit more serious. And I think it's a nice balance for me in my life.
That's so wonderful. I was just wondering, like, what the response, like you've said that you've seen a response with the Temporary Gift as a book. Is there any sort of a story that's really stood out to you? I'm sure you get many messages from lots of people, but is there any particular case or story that you remember that had a particular impact on you?
Actually, yeah, recently a woman contacted me from Zimbabwe, I believe. Okay. And her fiance actually passed away suddenly in a car accident I think just 1 or 2 weeks before they were meant to get married. And she had a really, really tough time dealing with it, as you know, we can imagine.
Oh, exactly.
And you know, right away, what came to her mind was, I need to read this book, A Temporary Gift, because I know that the author went through something similar. So she got that book for herself, and she got it for her fiance's mother and sister as well. Okay. So she ordered a couple of copies, and I love reading these messages and these stories, because she told me that just the impact of my book on her, and the amount of hope and patience and courage that it gave her wasn't something that she found elsewhere. Right. You know, so, and I get these messages a lot, you know, whether it's women who've been widowed, or people who are going through a terminal illness of themselves or their child or whatnot. And they message me and they tell me that this content isn't something that they found before, or that they've been looking for it. And I think that is something that I'm so, so grateful for, because I see it as an opportunity that I've been blessed with, you know, and to have that opportunity, to have that stage where you can not just tell your story, but impact others, I think is, you know, it's not something I made for myself. I think that it was part of God's plan for me. And, you know, the interesting thing is there's actually a section in my book called God's Plans. Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, and I just go through certain things that happened in my life after my husband passed away that just showed me how intricate God's plan for your life really is.
For sure, absolutely.
And like in the moment, it's hard to see, right? When something happens to you, you're like, I don't understand the purpose of this. But whether it's a week or a year or years later, you see how that event led you to so many opportunities, or so many positive things. It's really quite astounding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I often say in my books as well, or like when I speak to people, it's like, my life is so scripted. It's like, it's already been pre-planned, and everything happens the way it's meant to happen. And I don't think I would be the person that I am today if I hadn't been through the challenges that I've been through. So it's really amazing sometimes. It's like, and I think one of the core issues is, like, at least from what I've learned is, and I kind of heard it in your speaking as well, is like that ability to let go and just let things sort of happen, right? Like accepting that, you know, our life is not just in our hands. It's far beyond that, right? And just being able to trust. and taking that sort of leap of faith and saying, okay, God, like this is your plan, you know what you're doing. I'm a human being. I don't necessarily have all the answers. I don't know why this is happening, but I know that, you know, at the end, something good will come out of this. I just have to trust that it's gonna, you know, it's gonna happen.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful point.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So do you have any like last minute sort of remarks or advice or thoughts for the viewers that you'd like to share?
I think one of the most important things that I would tell anyone going through something difficult is just keep going. Just one more step, you know, just one more day. And this was something that I would tell myself, you know, in the moments, like the really, really dark moments where I just kind of wish that this didn't happen to me, or I just wish that I could remove myself from this experience, you know, because, you know, what happened to me, it's not like a one-time event and then the next day or even the next year it's done, you know, it's something with lifelong ramifications.
Yes.
So in the moments where I felt like, I wish that this didn't happen to me, or I just wish that I could get out of this somehow, what I told myself is, you know what, just one more day.
Right.
Just one more step.
Yeah.
You know, because one step turns into two, and one day turns into three, and then before you know it, you're at a point where you can look back and say, you know what, I'm better. You know, just because I had that patience to hold on to say, you know what, I'm not gonna look a year ahead, I'm not gonna look 10 years ahead, I'm gonna just take it day by day and do what's good for me and for my heart right now, and just trust God, you know? And I think that's what, like, because I used to get caught up in, well, where am I gonna be in 10 years? You know, is this pain ever gonna go away? And when I thought like that, it was painful because you don't know whether the pain's gonna go away. And I think just that line of just one more day or one more step really comforted me, you know, that I'm not responsible for the next day. I'm just responsible for today. What are the next things that I'm gonna do just in this day? And then, you know, God turns that day into a life, a beautiful life. And we talked about how He planned certain things. And now when I look back at every single thing that I went through, I think, wow, I really think, wow, that so many of the opportunities that I've had over the past couple of years would never have come to me if I hadn't gone through this difficult thing.
Wow.
You know?
Well, thank you for coming here today. Thank you for sharing your story.
My pleasure.
You're certainly someone who inspires me.
Thank you so much.
I really am very grateful for your strength, for your resilience, for your courage. And I'm sure there are many others out there that that we all know that are equally as inspired by you. So thank you again for being here.
My pleasure.
And to the audience, well, you know, you've heard this remarkable story. You know, please actually just ask Asma before we wrap up. Tell us where we can get your books, because now we want to know where they are.
Oh, so all my books are available on Amazon, but they're also available on my website,
Okay.
Ruqaya's Bookshelf. So if you Google Ruqaya's Bookshelf, you'll find it.
Okay, great. All right, audience, so you heard it here. Take a look at the Ruqaya's Bookshelf and definitely read Asma's story. And you know, it's an opportunity for us all to reflect on some of the difficulties and challenges we have in our lives, and how we can still, you know, continue to persevere and to build our lives and to move forward in the best way that we can. Until next week, take care.